Life in Australia is very good. The standard of living here in Australia is high, well above world standards, and most people have what they want within reason, and the wages in Australia are also very high by world standards. Very few people in Australia live in poverty, and unemployment is low, and when we are working, life is busy but very good. But do you ever give it any thought as to what will happen when you eventually stop work? At some stage, we're all going to have to stop work and eventually retire. For most people, it's a case of the sooner they retire, the better, as work is really just a means to an end for most. When we are actually able to retire will generally depend on what sort of shape our finances are in and your level of investments that you have. Most people are never really able to retire and look after themselves, let alone at an early age. Most people are forced to wait until they are at least 67 years old because that's when they are eligible for the government welfare, better known as the pension.
I know a lot of women in the same situation as me. We just survive. We earn lower super, lower wages. We're just surviving. I don't think all of us do live the life we want to live. We don't have a choice. It is what it is.
Pension costs will peak over the next decade. Treasury predicts our ageing population will require an increase in government spending of $16 billion by 2029. More than half of that increase will be on the aged pension alone.
Off the back of those ageing trends, it'll probably cost, in age pension terms, up to an extra $10 billion a year as a result of ageing.
If you are one of the majority of Australians who in retirement rely on the pension, which is basically welfare, the life is not that great. The basic pension for a couple is $320 per week each. The poverty line in Australia is considered to be $457 per week. So therefore, most pensioners are technically living below the poverty line. And this means no luxuries, very limited travel, very low level of living standards and entertainment. Many pensioners end up killing their time watching TV as this is all they can afford to do, or having to work long into an old age. Is this what you want? Can I hazard a guess to say no? I certainly don't want that for myself. Not only is the pension not that high, but it's also going to diminish further due to the fact that there are less taxpayers for every pensioner. Not so long ago, there was 5 taxpayers for every pensioner. Soon there will be 2 taxpayers for every pensioner. This is just not physically sustainable. Either there will be less pension paid out to older people, or people will just have to work longer, or a combination of both those things. Here, have a listen to arguably the best treasurer in Australian history, Peter Costello. He's going to have a talk about the pension and give you a heads up on that.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but if, like me, you've been dreaming of retirement, then it's time to wake up, because it seems retirement is a word we can no longer afford to speak.
All right. Excellent.
Is that all right?
That was great, Charlie. Well done.
Thanks, mate. Actually, you might find it a little depressing, because there are 3.5 million of us in Australia, you and me, over the age of 60, with no prospect, or very little prospect, of ever retiring. Really, it seems that the dreams we might ever have had of putting up our feet might be just that, dreams. What do you think is the future of retirement? What do you realistically think we're going to do?
I don't think there'll be a concept of retirement. Retirement is a word from another age. It was true. I think there are people that thought at 65, 67, 70, they might have enough to retire on, but they won't. And it's been a very testing investment climate. And I'd say to retirees now, better take a big interest in this, because investment returns are going to be really challenged in the years ahead. 5 taxpayers for every person in retirement.
Yes.
Soon it's going to be 2. And we just can't carry that. more people in retirement on pensions, less people in the workforce paying tax. The equation doesn't add up. It can't be done.
Because there are so few taxpayers for every pensioner, the eligible age to be able to get the pension will also need to increase. Presently, it's 67 years old, and very soon that age is going to go to 70 years old. So when you consider the average lifespan of a person, there's not going to be that many years in retirement to be able to enjoy that free time.
Thanks to the new rules and living longer, most retirees will run out of money just when they need it most, in their 70s and 80s. Superannuation is already confusing, and as Ross Greenwood explains, it's not helped by the government going for broke to mess with it further.
It's the dream, the promise that was sold to every Australian. Work hard, save hard, and your retirement years will be golden. But as Australians get older, the reality for almost all is endless work and not enough money. And it's only now dawning on most that they have been let down by the retirement system.
So, Alan, did you ever imagine that life would come to this?
I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I'd be cleaning people's bathrooms and toilets for a living.
66-year-old Alan Shepherd spent more than 25 years as a finance director at some of Australia's leading companies.
I can always remember my father telling me when I was much younger, study hard, work hard, and you'll be okay in your older age. It just hasn't turned out that way for me.
This trend towards more older workers is really easy to show you with our living example. Go back 20 years ago, 1996, 4 years before the Sydney Olympic Games. At that time in Australia, there were 120,000 people aged over 65 still working. That's around 1 in every 18 Australian seniors in the workforce. Fast forward to today, there are now almost 500,000 Australians still working over the age of 65. That's around 1 in every 8. And this trend is only set to continue. Ted's part of the generation that didn't have compulsory super. But even if he chose to stop work and receive the pension, it would be barely satisfactory. A single pensioner receives $20,664 a year. A couple receives $31,153 a year. All those living on the full pension live right on the Australian poverty line. But the government's making the pension harder to get. It's cut the assets retirees can hold, along with the family home, to around $800,000. So Ted keeps going to work 6 days a week in, week out.
If so few people have enough to retire even when they are old and at retirement age, how many people actually fulfill their dreams and achieve financial independence while they are young? The answer is very, very few. Truth is, we would all love to be financially independent where we didn't have to go to work at an early age. However, the stats show something completely different, and very, very few people achieve wealth and independence when they are young. Unfortunately, the statistics on how Australians are actually retiring is frightening. Most Australians are retiring below the poverty line and are forced to accept government welfare just to even stay alive. Very few Australians have the capacity to look after themselves in retirement. The statistics are as follows. Only 2% of Australians have the capacity to look after themselves in retirement and have an income equal to or greater than $50,000 a year. Now that's only 2%. So 98% of people are underneath almost at the poverty line. That's a very scary figure when you think about the average wage for a full-time employee is above $50,000 per year, but yet only 2 people are getting that income in retirement. So why the big drop? Why are people retiring so poor? There are a few reasons why Australians are retiring so poor. And they're probably not what you may think. While most people would suggest that living beyond your means is the main reason why people retire poor, that is not actually the case. People who set budgets and don't overspend, mind their money and save are still retiring poor. Even those with high paying jobs are still retiring poor. Why is this so? One of the biggest problems that we're facing is people never give financial independence much thought when they're young. We tend to live for the now. Even if we're saving money, we can't save ourselves to wealth. And I don't mean that people are necessarily spending all of their money. They may be saving. They may be earning a good income, but they don't realise that their income will not go on forever. They are not really understanding that the income from a job will eventually be turned off, and then they'll have nothing to support themselves after that. Secondly, even if they have given financial independence some thought, most people have no idea on how much they need in the form of assets to provide them with an income that's going to be suitable to them. Let's say, for argument's sake, that you did want to retire on an income of just $50,000 a year from your investments. Let me ask you, how many dollars worth of net assets would you need to return $50,000 per year? Have you got any idea on how to calculate that? It's a very important equation. The best way to work it out is to look at an anticipated yield from your investments of 4%. That means if you're getting dividends from shares, you might receive those at around a rate of 4%. You draw down your superannuation at a rate of 4%. And with property, if you're lucky, you might get 5% as a rental yield. However, even if you own that property outright with no debt, it's still going to cost you 1% to run that property for the year. So therefore, we look at a yield of 4% of property as well. So to calculate out what you're going to need in the form of net assets to return your desired income, the easiest way to do it is have your desired income times that by 25. And that will give you how many dollars worth of net assets net that you need to own to return what you want. Let's look at an example of this. If you're a husband and wife and you would like to retire on a combined income of $100,000 per year before tax, well, easy way to work that out is $100,000 times 25 to give us our return of 4%. That means that the husband and wife would need to own $2.5 million worth of net assets to give them $100,000 per year. Remember, that figure is net assets. And this means it's gross asset values less any debt that's owned on those assets. Also, remember this as well. Your own home does not get included in this equation because that does not give you any income in retirement, unfortunately. So you can see that you need a significant amount of assets to return a decent income and retire well. Why don't you take a minute now to calculate how much you need? Remember the equation. Desired income in retirement, don't worry about inflation, times that figure by 25, and that will give you the amount of net assets that you need. So as highlighted, problem number one as to why people aren't retiring poor is because most people don't actually know that they need to be putting assets away for retirement. They have no idea that they're staring down a financial cliff that they could fall off at any time soon. Secondly, even if they have an idea of what they want, they have no idea on how much they need in the form of net assets to retire well. The third problem that people have is this. People don't allow themselves enough time to build up an asset base that will enable them to retire. Most people will get to age 55 and then decide that that they want to retire at age 60, and they give themselves 5 years to build up an asset base of $3 million. 5 years is a very short period to build up an asset base of net assets of $3 million. To be honest, it's really not enough time. It takes years to build up a net asset base of several $1 million. Okay? And remember, this excludes your own home.
We needed to actually sell our place in Melbourne to move somewhere where we could better afford to live and have some money to put into super. That was the bottom line. We would not have been able to continue to afford to live in that house because we wouldn't have had the super to do it.
And if you can't tell a person when they're going
The risk is that you live too long
and run out of money.
65 meant the end of work and the start of retirement. But now, thousands of older Australians are forced to stay in the workforce longer and longer.
It's grown massively. These are record numbers and we will continue to see this number rise.
The main reason, we're all living longer.
So a 65-year-old today can expect to live another 21 years.
And the longer we live, the longer we spend, extending careers to cover the cost of travel, busier lifestyles, and often medical costs, and to top up super funds gouged by the GFC.
So as you can see, Australians are falling from a financial cliff when they decide to stop work because they're unaware that it's in front of them. Very few people are ever able to retire and look after themselves, and even fewer are able to retire young. So then what do we do? What's the answer to the question? How do we get Australians retiring richer? Retiring with enough money to be able to actually enjoy their later years in life? And how do we get to be one of those top 1% of Australians ourselves? The answer is actually pretty simple. You have to invest to be financially independent at any age. Simply putting money into superannuation can help, but this is definitely not enough and not the right answer. To start, you're going to be looking at two different asset classes, property versus shares. I've always found that most Australians like property and it is their asset of choice. It is very safe and a very good long-term investment, but you need to know what you are doing. There are so many different properties available on the market with different locations, it can be very confusing for a first-time investor or even somebody looking to expand their portfolio. I can help you get into the market and make money out of property in a very safe and stress-free manner. I've helped thousands of Australians just like yourself achieve wealth through property investing. I can give you the right advice to be able to get to where you want to be and make sure that your property portfolio is working correctly and efficiently and is making you money. A bit about my background. My background is I'm a chartered accountant. I used to work for a big accounting firm here in Australia before I moved to London, and I worked in investment banks in London for 7 years. On my return to Australia, I set up my own property business, which is called the Rogers Property Group. I'm also qualified as a financial planner. I'm qualified as a mortgage broker. I have my own builder's license. I've been involved in tens of millions of dollars worth of property transactions. I've been a guest speaker for the National Australia Bank, for the Australian Federal Government, for Westpac, for the police department. I've had plenty of experience and I am well qualified to give you advice around all facets of investment. If you don't want to be one of the many Australians that are retiring so poor and you want to be up in that top 1 or 2% of Australians, then please send me an email or give the office a call and book in some time to have a chat with myself. You will not regret it. The numbers don't lie. Calculate out for yourself where you're headed with your finances. It's very important that you think about this as early as possible. I can't stress to you enough. You want to be in that top 1%, not in that 98% that's retiring very, very poor.